Hello, welcome into the garage. It's been a while, I think, since we've had a chat from in here, but because the car hasn't really needed anything doing to it other than servicey bits and tweaks between races. But I have got a thing to fix today, so I thought I'd kick off this video with a fix. So the thing I'm fixing is the airbox lid, and I noticed this cracking way earlier in the season, and it's got to the point now I noticed it when the car was being scrutinised after Snetterton, that this was basically broken off now. So if I need to undo all these fixings, but yeah, that corner's effectively not attached anymore. So I'm going to replace that. You can't buy the lids on their own. I had to get a full airbox, but they're not too expensive from Caterham, so no real harm done. So yeah, I'll get on with that now. So pretty easy to remove. You see the broken corner there. Just a few screws, but it does come off with the inlet to the throttle body. So that, I remember from the build, was a bit of a pain to slot into there. So I'm going to do this on the new lid now, and probably not video, because it definitely was a pain in the ass. Correction, that was not a pain in the ass. Maybe I learned something over winter. So yeah, that's that done really. I'm going to pop the old filter back in. I do have a new one to go in the car at some point, but I'll just stick that used one in for now. And yeah, happy days. Fix done. A bit more maintenance on the Caterham. I noticed I had a little bit of diff oil collecting on the bottom of the differential, which it's a kind of sealed unit, except obviously the drive shaft output seals and the prop shaft input seal. Apparently it's not that unheard of for it to effectively breathe any excess oil out through the seals. So I've cleaned it all up, and I thought it's the best part of a year on the car now with the first batch of diff oil. So I'll take it out, measure how much I'm getting out. Obviously I've got a little Draper suction pump. These are like 12 quid on Amazon. Really helpful for this, so you don't have to either take the diff out of the car to drain it, or take the diff plate off and refit that. This is just a good way to get most of the oil out. Obviously you're never going to get all of it out, but it's done a pretty good job. I think I'm up to 700 mil I've got out of it now, and there's still a bit in the pipe, as you can see, and the capacity of the diff's only 800 mil. So obviously it's breathed a little bit. There'll be some oil just trapped in there that I won't get out without properly taking it apart, but I'm be happy with that. So I'll just put back in what I took out. Obviously fresh oil, not the old stuff, and then I'll just use the same pump to pump it back in. Job done. Good evening. Back in the garage, hiding from the rain, hence the garden furniture piled up over there until we figure out a proper home for it. And the strings are out again. I'm not doing anything major here. I'm just kind of checking the alignment after I've not checked it the last couple of events. And all's good, all is well, and just kind of a little bit of a focus thing, so I'm doing something for the first time. I've always struggled to get accurate camber readings with my cheaper digital camber gauge, which kind of magnet sticks on there. You kind of can't fit it in the camera, but you mount that against the wheel, and it should be dead easy. Camber should be the easiest thing to measure, but for one reason or another, probably the cheap gauge, I just can't get a reliable and repeatable measurement, and it's not the sort of thing I want to flirt with the regulations on. So the idea is just mounting a pole up above and then dropping the string down with a little bit of a weight on the bottom, and then just doing the same process as toe measurements, but obviously 90 degrees round, converting the millimetres to degrees across the rim diameter. Jobbed. And I'm finding that a lot nicer. It's a pain in the backside to set up, but once it's set up, I'm getting much more repeatable measurements. I've had the car on and off the turn plates a couple of times, and yeah, I'm getting the same measurements each time, which is now reassuring. And I've also had a couple of little V-Box niggles, not V-Box niggles, but the third party add-on to add throttle and brake traces to the data. The wiring adapter looked like it had a loose connection inside it somewhere. It was becoming a bit flaky. So the support from RaySense, really good. They sent me out a new cable free of charge with some guidance on how to make it a little bit more reliable just by making sure this is all secured nicely in the car instead of banging around like mine is. And I've taken the V-Box itself out because it was dual locked onto my transmission tunnel all season, and I noticed in the last couple of track days, the kind of hot weather we'd been having, it started the adhesive on the dual lock had started giving way, and this is quite an expensive thing to be bouncing around in the footwell. So I'm going to take it in the house after these brake pads are on, and I'm going to do some measuring up, get the CAD out, and make a 3D printed bracket, I think, for it, so I can screw the bracket onto the transmission tunnel. So that is my plan. So a quick note on brake pads. They're not too worn. I could have got more out of these, probably finished the season on them, but I do have an issue where I get a long pedal when the pads get too thin. So I stuck some new ones in for Silverstone, and it really does help. So that's something I need to keep an eye on for next season, I think, and potentially put fresh pads in more often. Right, quick V-Box update. As you saw, I was CADing away. Took me a fair few attempts, fair few iterations to be honest, but I'm there now. So this is nicely, the lighting's rubbish and my torch battery's dead, but you'll have to take my word for it. It's that's better. It's pretty robust. Bolted into some riv nuts. In there, I've tidied the wiring up loads. This is the new Y cable from RaceSense, which is now secured with a riveted clip there and secured up here. I mean, you can't, this is all out of light, it looks messy under here, but you can't see that from head height, so it's all fine. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm just going to get the transmission tunnel back on. I just took that off to make sure I wasn't drilling rivets into the side of my gearbox. So yeah, I'm going to put this cover back on. Maybe I'll leave the bead seat out so I can do some cleaning and call it a night. Welcome to Silverstone, Thursday testing in the rain. So yeah, this was proper wet. The wettest we've had. In fact, the first wet session most of us have had at a race weekend. So it's exciting stuff. A lot of people have never driven a Caterham before in the wet, potentially before this. I had a couple of times, and I came into this with pretty low confidence. We were last at Silverstone 2 weeks ago, and we had a bit of a wet morning, followed by a drying lunch and a dry afternoon, and I was miles off in the wet. Several seconds off the people I needed to be matching. But I'm happy to say I did kind of turn that around a little bit. By the end of this session, by the end of this test, I wasn't quite matching the really fast people. You know who you are. But I felt like I'd done enough to take on board the notes and the coaching and the data from the previous wet day and turn that into real progress. I've chosen this clip just to show the kind of the worst of the conditions. It's not the fastest session, not by a long shot, but you can see just how bad it was. Coming around this hairpin here, just filling the cockpit with water. We were like having to dry our bead seats out over lunch, and the overalls were draped over the warm bonnets of the cars to try and dry our clothes up. It was minging, but I really enjoyed driving on the track, driving in these conditions. You know, there were a few sketchy moments which were fairly scary, but I felt like I was progressing at last in the wet. And although I wasn't buzzing about the idea of racing in these conditions, certainly if we'd have qualified in these conditions, I would have felt a little bit better than I did, the day before. Before this test had started. So that was great. That was it's what it's all about, right? Just learning the different conditions, and we really have been lucky with the dry weather this year. So here we are for Saturday morning. We woke up to clear skies, bright sun, and the floor had dried since yesterday, which is a miracle. But it's we had 50 mile an hour gust winds on Saturday, which really helped dry the floor up. As you can see though, when in assembly, the clouds came over and it started raining while we were sat in assembly waiting to go out. So the rain was light, but rain is rain, and I very much went out for this lap planning for this to be the quickest lap of the session. I expected it to keep getting wetter, which it did. And so this first lap, obviously not this right now, this is an out lap, but the first flying lap would need to be a good one. So I was psyching myself up to keep it safe, keep it clean, but not dawdle around, trying to warm tyres up or whatever else. You'll see, just trying to find out what the grip's like on this out lap, just try and get a feel for it, and then just get on it, get around this out lap as quickly as possible and see if we can put a quick one together. So this is going out for the first hot lap of the session. As I say, trying to keep it tidy, but try and get a decent lap down. The lap was okay. There was not much front end grip through here, as you can see, kind of understeering off the track. And similarly through this left, in the dry, this is flat out around here. I think I get a little bit of oversteer around this hairpin. Let's see, yeah, there we go. And after that, it wasn't too bad. There was a little bit of traffic towards the end of the lap, but it was pretty good. And this was good enough for second, I think, overall. So by the time we'd all set our first lap, I think I was in P2. Now after this, the lap times dropped. It got wetter and wetter, and this lap was in the low 26s, and we were doing 29s, 30s. I think at one point I did a 32. The track was getting worse, and during that middle section, I won't make you watch all of it, there was a lot of exploring and hunting the grip, and I did find grip coming away from the racing line, but the problem with that is even if you find the grip, you're off the racing line, so you're just losing heaps of time compared to this lap where I am on the dry line. What I did notice though, right towards the end of the session, was my delta through the first corner started getting a little bit better. I was getting closer and closer to the dry time. So on the very last lap, I made the decision to commit back to the dry line and see what we could do. So I will play that for you uninterrupted now. So there we go, that was a mid 124, which was a good over a second quicker than the previous delta that I had, and I was pretty happy with that on the in lap. I was getting pretty excited actually about hearing where that would leave me. I was kind of tempering hope and excitement a little bit because I very much came in from the Silverstone Qualifying thinking that I'd nailed pole position. So this is the painful bit as a driver. You've kind of got to trundle back to the pits and wait to find somebody who cares enough about what's going on to be keeping track of live timing, and then be kind enough to let you know let you know how you did. As this was me in the pit lane where Jamie and my dad stick their head around the corner of the pit garage around now. So there you go, celebrating like I've won the championship. It was the single finger went up from my dad and from Jamie, and that was it. That was pole position. Absolutely over the moon with it. I've come close a couple of times this season, and you know, I knew I had one in me at some point, and I'm so happy to have got one, particularly in these mixed conditions as well. Where although you can't really say it was a fully wet session, not compared to the test day the day previous, but to get a pole position in mixed conditions felt amazing. Got the pole by 4/10, I think, which is a pretty handy gap, but kind of circumstance, drying track. A lot of things have to go your way. Having the right amount of traffic at the right time. Picked up a pretty good tow behind Rich Northridge, who's just in front of me in the queue, going onto the hanger straight. It all worked out well, but I think sometimes you've got to get a little bit lucky. The lap was still pretty good. I'm really happy with it. There was one kind of downside to the result of qualifying. I've not really talked about it at all on this channel yet, but my position in the championship, I've been kind of hovering around 5th all year since the Thruxton bad result at Thruxton. But once you calculate dropped results and stuff, I was actually sort of tied 3rd for a lot of the season, and it was a 3-way tie for a long time between George Hawkins, Rich Davies, and myself. George had a bad race at Snetterton. He was a bit unfortunate there, which kind of turned it into a bit of a 2-horse race between Rich Davies and myself. We came into Silverstone one point apart. He was ahead, but it basically meant whoever came in front of the other person would probably clench third in the title. So it was a bit of a downer to hear that because of the wet conditions. Rich had been down in P19 for practically the whole of qualifying, and similar to me, he put in a really good lap right at the end, and that meant he would be lining up right next to me on the grid for the race tomorrow. So it set up for a bit of a showdown, which I guess in hindsight is exciting, but at the time I was kind of thinking Rich could have done me a favour by not putting in a good lap at the end. Hey ho.